Yeah.
This is the Social Factor.
Welcome back to the Social Factor.
Hola!
The funny thing is that my microphone levels are in the red because I'm so close to the mic. Should maybe move it over.
Yeah, move it to the center.
Center here.
There you go. Still in the red?
Nope.
Alright, we're good.
Okay, sometimes it's in the red.
Then back up a little. Is it when I speak or is it when you speak?
It's when I speak. Like, yeah, right now. Oh, wait a second. No, it's not in the red for me right now. Now you talk.
Hello.
Okay, we're good. We're good.
Alright, well, you should have probably done that before we started.
Yeah. Okay, so so we're gonna do part 2 on Japan, and
Also known as the Rising Sun.
yeah, last week I didn't really think that we would have a part 2 because Japan is such a small country. Like I said, it's no bigger than 2 Koreas.
Although, you can't forget the history Japan does have.
Right, exactly.
So, even though we like to compare, our episodes to the size of a nation, sometimes a big country may not have a long history.
Right, exactly.
Like the United States, for instance.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And if you're wondering when the United States is coming, we'll keep you posted on that.
Yeah. We might keep the U.S. Undercover or under wraps for a while.
Yeah, under wraps for right now.
For right now, okay.
Because it's it's our home country, so
Yeah,
and
plus the history, modern history of the United
there's
States.
so much history.
Well, it's smaller than any other nation.
But you get my point.
Except of Germany.
Yeah. So I just a few what do you call it? Plugs.
Okay, let's go for
A
it.
few plugs quickly just before we start. Our Facebook. If you're tuning in because you came from Facebook, well then you already know it. However, if you're coming from Spreaker, which is our platform for this,
Yay.
you can go check out our Facebook at facebook.com/The Social Factor Podcast. And there you can keep up to date with episodes, what's going on, all that stuff. We are currently actively working on transferring transferring the podcast into transcripts so that we can post that as a blog on our website.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more work than I thought it would be, but basically that's what's going to happen. Is the audio show is not going away. Audio show is not going away. What I'm doing is basically taking the research from each episode and basically putting it in a blog format on our website.
Awesome.
So, with that being said, I don't think there's anything else that we need to get out of the way before we get into this, I don't think.
Well, all I know is we're starting in the 11th or 12th century. And, from last week, just to cap it up, Japan was strongly influenced by China.
Yep.
Also Korea at some points. And it's a dynasty at some point lost power over its own country because the different aristocracies or the different families that ran it. And of course this leads into the Civil War that broke out and that kind of began the feudal Japan.
Yeah.
The feudal era of Japan. And you can take from there.
Alright. So last week we ended with the Heian period in Japan. And so now, with this one, we are going to begin with Japan in the Middle Ages.
Yep.
Or
known as feudal Japan.
Known as feudal Japan, yes. Now, when people say the Middle Ages, I assume we're talking about medieval times, right?
Yeah. And why it's called the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages or the medieval was because in the majority of the world, the plague destroyed so much between the late 1100s all the way through the 1600s the Renaissance era really started in the 1500s, but that kind of brought everything to the golden age, right?
Yeah.
But for like a good 400 to 500 years, many cultures and many nations were devastated by the plague, and that's really why they call it the Middle Ages.
Yeah. So let's just get right into this.
Let's do it.
So basically, the emperor had given Yoritomo, which we actually talked about in last week. He's one of two brothers, Yoritomo and Yoshitsune. Yeah. So anyway, the emperor, he actually gave Yoritomo the title of Saitai Shogun in 1192, and that basically means barbarian, conquering great general.
Which means he was the conqueror of the barbarian. He was a great general conquering
Exactly.
the barbarian.
Exactly.
It's kind of funny how they have that set up, though. Very misleading.
Exactly. So, Shogun, his title, that became the real power in Japan, ruling in the emperor's name. So that new form of government, it was called Bakufu. Bakufu? I think that's how you pronounce that, yeah. And that means tent government. And it's because generals, they gave commands from the tents during the wartime.
Very good.
Yep. So then came Yoritomo's death. So two of his sons, after his death, ruled Japan in turn. But his second son, unfortunately, was assassinated in 1219. Yoritomo's wife's family took power.
Was given power.
Yeah. And they are called, Yoritomo's wife's family, they are called the Hojo. Whatever that means.
It's the name of the family or clan.
Okay. So then Japan, after that, Japan had an emperor who, he was only a figurehead. He was a shogun and a Hojo. Regent. Shogun and Hojo regent. Ruling on behalf of the shogun.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think the proper pronunciation is Shogun.
Oh, Shogun? Shogun?
Shogun. Just the way it looks.
Okay.
Because I know, like over the many years, there used to be a show in Europe called the Shogun. And in Japanese martial arts, like anything that involves the sword, a Shogun-ryu is called the school of Shogun. Okay. So
Yeah. Okay.
part of the Bushido training.
So, town and trade actually grew in Japan during the 13th and 14th centuries. Merchants then became wealthy. And this is where guilds came in, because they started to organize guilds, the guilds and stuff like that. And you want to explain what a guild is again?
Basically, what a guild is an organization of individuals who do the same thing, who are masters at it. And the best way to describe it in modern terms is like if you have the Masonic lodges or the Masons, okay? They all started as a guild. And a guild is like a union.
Yeah.
Okay, like a job is pretty much like you have steel workers or trained people, and they're a guild because they fall under the union. Now, in modern terms, you can't compare the two, but I'm just saying it's like an organization of the same type of profession or mastery, and it's a supportive group, and they get all kinds of benefits out of it.
Okay. So then, Zen Buddhism, which emphasizes meditation, that became popular around that time. So then, followers of that, they began to meditate, and they just wanted to, they tried to empty their minds of all worldly thoughts and desires. Mm-hmm. Others meditated on riddles, which were called koan,
Koan.
such as like, what is the sound of one hand clapping? So just like basically just clapping the air.
These were people that were a little deeper. I think they're more like they were looking at life as a big puzzle. And
Okay.
they wanted to they were almost like scientists. Okay.
So Zen, it was a tremendous influence on things, arts, things like gardening and flower arranging and stuff like that. And for those that wanted to know, the art of Japanese flower arranging is actually called ikebana. It's from the 15th century, and it basically it was developed into a sophisticated art.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, at the time, as well, the tea ceremony developed in Japan. And I thought that the UK was known for its tea, but apparently Japan is too.
The UK is known for its tea because of India.
Oh.
The Japanese are known for their ceremony because they were always a very ritualistic culture.
Okay.
And every ceremony has its meanings. The tea
Yeah.
ceremony, from what I understand, usually was something that it could be almost like a man and a woman that just
Yeah.
met each other and are becoming acquainted, and it
Yeah.
would be like a way for them to, and it would be like, it had to be done perfectly.
Okay.
I mean, it's a ritual.
So, tea seeds were actually brought from China in 1191 from a monk named Asai, and this was actually tradition. Now, this Asai person, she or he, whoever it is, sounds like a female name to me, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Male? Okay. This person was born in 1141, passed away in 1215. And he basically believed that tea, it helped monks stay alert whenever they were meditating.
Which makes sense because tea does have a level of caffeine in it.
Yeah. And to maintain the calm mood, the tea was prepared slowly and very carefully. Gradually, the process of making and as well as drinking the tea in sort of a peaceful, relaxing environment spread to the nobility and merchants. And then, in the late 16th century, the tea ceremony, or what we call Shanoyu, it was developed into its modern form, which is called Sen no. Oh no, it's just not called. It was developed into a modern form by an actual person.
Yes.
I thought that this was a
Senno
term.
Rikyu.
Yeah, it was developed into the tea ceremony was developed into modern form by a person called Sen no Rikyu,
Yep.
who lived from 1522 to 1519.
Okay, no. Stop.
Yeah,
Does that make any sense to you?
that makes no sense to me because if we're all
Backwards.
if we're all the way over here, if this person was born, if this person
It's
Yes.
a typo. It's
Oh.
a typo. Okay. Now, this person wasn't 3 years old. This was just a clerical error.
Oh, hey, I just noticed that.
That's why I
Yeah.
pointed it out.
So he died. He was born in the future and he died in the past.
But he didn't. This is incorrect.
Yeah. That I know.
That's.
It's incorrect.
I would completely void that because.
Okay. Void that out. Yeah, we're just gonna forget what
All,
year he
all
lived
that
in.
matters is the person because the dates are way
Yeah,
off.
I did not notice this typo in the research, so
That's fine.
my bad. So we do not know when So no Rikyu,
Sen no Rikyu.
Sen no Rikyu, was born, but it's not. I guess it's not really essential to this research right now.
No.
So we're just gonna skip that.
Okay, that's good.
Yep, we'll skip it. All right. So, the Mongols actually tried to conquer Japan in the middle of this era. Whoever the Mongols are.
Mongolia.
Oh, that's
Genghis Khan.
That's what they're called.
The Mongols, yeah, Genghis Khan.
Oh, I thought they were just called Mongolians.
Well, no, they are Mongolians, but when you talk of the entire tribes,
Yeah.
you call them the Mongols, like the Mongol horde. You ever heard that word? The Mongol horde.
Yeah, I've heard that.
The Mongols covered a region that was larger than Alexander the Great. Okay.
Okay.
And so the Mongols at that time were starting to get into Russia, China, and they wanted to go to Japan.
Oh, okay.
And that's what we're talking about right now.
Yeah. So it was in 1274 and 1281 that they sent fleets. And then in 1274, the Mongols landed, but they also withdrew.
Their fleet.
Right when their fleet was endangered by a storm.
Lucky for the Japanese.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So in 1281, the Mongols landed again. And then for 7 weeks, they held a bridgehead in Japan. And again, their fleet was scattered by a typhoon.
Oh, see again, the Japanese had the blessings, I guess.
Yeah. And the Japanese, they called it kamikaze. I've heard of that before.
Yeah, they named the typhoon Kamikaze.
It's divine wind.
Yeah. And it's funny because in the future, like in World War II, that name becomes very famous.
Yeah. For those wondering what a typhoon is, it's basically an intense windstorm in the body of water.
Yep.
Like at sea.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it creates large waves.
Very large waves. So it cost a great deal of money to fight the Mongols.
Sure did.
Yep. So basically, because it meant a great deal of money, that meant high taxes, and basically the government really became unpopular during that time.
Yeah, it was the Sheriff of Nottingham all over again.
Yep. So during that time, the emperor, who was Go-Daigo, he did not really want to be a mere figurehead during that time. So, it was in 1333 that he decided to fight the Hojo by raising an army. So these Hojos, they set a force under the general, whose name was Ashikaga Takauji.
Ashikaga Takauji.
Okay.
Takauji.
David is fantastic with pronouncing any name whatsoever.
Well, actually, Japanese is my favorite because I studied several martial arts.
Yeah.
So, Ashikaga Takauji.
Yeah.
Takauji.
But then, unfortunate for them,
Yeah.
this guy ended up changing sides.
That's awesome.
So, he ended up joining forces with Emperor Go-Daigo, and these Hojos, they committed suicide.
When you think about it, that would be a mass suicide.
That would be, yeah. Yeah. So then, Go-Daigo and Ashiga...
No, it's Go-Daigo.
Go-Daigo and Ashikaga Takauji...
There you go, you got it.
Takauji. They... Soon enough, they quarreled.
Yeah.
Now, quarreled means...
Started picking a fight.
Yeah, they started picking
Quarrel
a fight.
means to be engaged in a
Oh, so
fight.
they started fighting against each other, yeah.
And that's a given right there.
And this dude, Takauji, he led a rebellion in 1336.
Yeah.
So, this caused Go-Daigo to flee to Yoshino.
Yoshino.
And then Takauji, he created a rival emperor in Kyoto.
No, that's Kyoto.
And Kyoto, it was close enough.
Kyoto sounds a little different.
Kyoto.
Yeah, I think the Y becomes a Y.
Oh, in which he ruled as shogun. Yeah. So basically, Japan had 2 emperors until 1392. So now, this is the end of the Middle Ages.
No, we're still in the Middle Ages.
Oh, we are?
Yeah. Because the Middle Ages continue all the way to the early 1600s.
Oh, okay. Alright, so now we're in the Muromachi period.
Yeah, Muromachi.
This period is from 1333 to 1573, and it is called the Muromachi period because the Ashikaga family ruled from the Muromachi district of Kyoto. So during this period, a place called No Theater was developed in Japan.
Almost sounds like there's no theater.
I know, right? No theater was,
No.
but see, in our
No
research,
H.
there's an H after that, so
Yeah.
we know it's a name.
No.
Yeah, we know it's a name, exactly. So basically, these people that acted there wore masks to perform on a completely bare stage that had a painted backdrop. And musicians would accompany the actors.
I've actually seen that.
Really?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Okay. So, 2 great monuments actually survived from this Muromachi period. Maki, forget.
It's fine. Machi is fine.
Okay.
Maki is fine.
Which were, and now these are in Kyoto. These are the Kinkakuji and the Jinkakuji. Yeah, so that's that. Then,
The gold and silver pavilions in Kyoto.
oh, they were gold and silver pavilions.
That's
Yeah,
that's what that name means.
Oh, so Kinkakuji means gold,
Gold.
and Jinkakuji means silver.
Kingaku-ji silver pavilion with a G at the end. J. See how it's Kingaku-ji?
Kingakuji,
Yeah.
Jinkakuji.
Yeah. That both of that means gold and silver pavilions. So the G is the pavilion.
Oh, G means pavilion.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Accompanying the word
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Kyoto.
Yeah, that makes sense. The Ashikaga family argued who would be the next shogun in 1466. And this argument led to the Onin
Oh,
War,
I heard of that.
which the Onin War was from 1467 to 1477. And all the fighting pretty much took place around Kyoto, and the entire city was pretty much destroyed.
That was actually one of the most devastating civil wars that they had
Okay.
from that era. Because
Oh.
I've actually heard about the Onin War, and they made movies about this.
So by the end,
Besides studying it, but
so at the end of the 15th century, authority figures had basically just completely disappeared in Japan. There was still an emperor, but he was just a figurehead. So Japan was afflicted by a long series of civil wars as rival landowners, which were called daimyos.
daimyos.
Yeah,
Daimyo.
yeah. Anyway, these rival landowners, they fought for power. So now the Portuguese are arriving in Japan.
That's never a good thing.
So the Portuguese, they arrived in Japan in 1542. Anyway, so there was two Portuguese were passengers on a Chinese ship which landed at Tanegashima Island. They were these Portuguese people. They were very keen to trade with the Japanese, so they returned. And very quickly, Japanese people, they learned to make guns from Portuguese teachings. And these Portuguese people also, they brought tobacco, sweet potatoes to Japan, and also clocks. Now the Japanese, they called Portuguese Namban, which I guess that means southern barbarians.
Barbarians.
Oh,
Southern
or
barbarians.
just barbarians in general. And that was just because they sailed to Japan from the south.
Here's the funny part, though. If you translate what, like it says, Southern barbarians.
Yep.
When you think of the word barbarians, what do you think?
Barbaric. Like.
Which describes what? A lesser.
Yeah.
A lesser.
Barbaric. Yeah, lesser person.
Aggressive, angry, violent.
Exactly.
Okay, and uncultured. Okay, and that's what the Japanese thought of the Portuguese. They thought of everyone other than Japanese and Chinese that way.
Oh, okay.
And that would later on really play a big role in Japanese history. Was the West, and even was the East.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, more religion hit Japan in 1549 because Francis Xavier led a bunch of Jesuit missionaries to Japan, and because they wanted to convert Japanese people to Roman Catholicism. So the Japanese did tolerate them at first.
At first.
At first, yeah. And then in 1571, Nagasaki was founded to trade with the Europeans, and that became the center of missionary activity. So then, meanwhile, in Japan, warfare was greatly changed by the introduction of handguns and cannons. A warlord whose name was Oda Nobunaga. He very quickly learned to use the new weapons, and soon after, in 1569, captured the port of Sakai. And then he won a great victory at Nagashino in 1575, and he died in 1582, in which he controlled central Japan. So this guy, or this woman, what does it look like?
Let me tell you something. Unless they specify a woman's name,
Yeah,
like as a female,
yeah.
it was a definite. Japan was a dominantly male society.
Okay.
Okay,
So then,
so we're gonna assume all the big names are males.
okay. So, this person, Oda Nobunaga, in 1582, he was assassinated. However, his general, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, actually avenged his death and continued the work of Japan reuniting together.
Yep.
1587. This was in 1587. He subdued the southern part of so it is a southern island, yeah. He subdued the southern island of Kyushu. Kyushu. And then, in 1590, he had also conquered eastern Japan. So then Toyotomi, he then attempted to conquer Korea. He failed, though, and the Japanese withdrew in 1598, in which Toyotomi, he died shortly afterwards.
Now, he failed, he comes back, and he dies shortly afterward. What do you think happened?
Betrayed?
Ritual suicide.
Oh.
He was a top dog from the military, and he failed.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that a lot of Westerners don't understand, especially regarding the Japanese. When they failed, it was like the ultimate failure.
Right.
And they had to keep their honor so their families would be okay.
Okay.
And by doing so, Sabuku, I think it's called,
Yeah.
is another one that's Harakiri. It's the other word I've ever heard. It's a ritualistic suicide.
Okay.
We talked about that in another episode. So
Yeah.
right.
So Toyotomi, he had a son named Hideyori, and he wanted his son Hideyori to succeed him. So before he died, talk about Toyotomi here. He persuaded his general Tokugawa, I guess was something,
Ieyasu.
Ieyasu, to basically to promise to support his son. Unfortunately, Ieyasu, he unfortunately did break his promise, and he took the power for himself. So, he crushed his rivals at Sekigahara in 1600, although Hideyori survived. And then in 1603, Ieyasu was made shogun, and in 1615 his forces captured Osaka Castle, which is the stronghold of Hideyori, and then Hideyori ended up killing himself, and then Japan became united under a strong central government, and the Tokugawa family ruled as its shoguns until 1868. Now, I'm going to let David take over.
Oh, yay.
So that you can,
Yeah, I got you. So the Tokugawa period in Japan, that family was one of the strongest families that Japan ever saw. And during, during the Tokugawa period, Japanese society was strictly divided. At the top were the daimyo and landowners. Below them were the samurai, hereditary warriors. Below them came the farmers, the craftsmen, and the merchants. And the lower you went, the less you had, the less you got to respect. So meanwhile, in the 1600s, or in 1600, a badly damaged Dutch ship landed in Japan. On board was an Englishman by the name of William Adams, and he was taken to Ieyasu, who questioned him. Adams showed the Japanese how to build 2 European-style ships. He also married a Japanese woman and lived in Japan until his death in 1620. Now, in 1609, another Dutch ship arrived in Japan. The shogun granted the Dutch the right to trade with Japan. And in 1613, an English ship came the shogun's... What? English ship came?
No, it says in 1613 an English ship came in the shogun.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, something like that.
Again, another typo.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's no division. And the shogun gave them the right to trade. Meanwhile, Japanese merchants sailed to Taiwan and the Philippines, a Spanish colony. And in 1610, a Japanese merchant called Tanaka Shosuke sailed to Mexico. Wow.
It's quite the distance there.
Yeah.
Especially in that time period.
You think? However, despite trading with foreigners, the Japanese began persecuting Christians. The government feared Christians were a threat to Japan's internal security. And in 1597, Toyotomi Hideyoshi had 26 Christians, including 9 European missionaries, crucified in Nagasaki. In 1612, Christianity was banned altogether in Japan, and persecution of Christians grew worse and worse. Finally, in 1637, Christians in Shimabara area rebelled. Well, they took up arms against the Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
However, in 1638, the following year, the rebellion was crushed, and Christians were massacred. The Japanese government then shut their country off from the rest of the world between 1633 all the way to 1639. Laws were passed forbidding the Japanese to travel abroad or to build ocean-going ships. Only Chinese and Dutch were allowed to trade with Japan. So I guess the Dutch were kind of nice with, they were, in the same bed with Japan.
Yeah.
In 1641, the Dutch were restricted to an island in Nagasaki Harbor called Dejima. This policy of isolating Japan was called Sakuku.
Sakuku.
No, actually, I guess the policy of isolation is actually called Sakoku. All right. However, Japan did not cut itself off from the outside world completely. Dutch books were still imported, and the Japanese ruling class were quite well informed of what was happening in the outside world. So, it's kind of a double standard. The poor never knew,
Yeah.
The Tokugawa government went through great lengths to maintain control about 1/4 of the land in Japan. So they had quite a bit of land that they were controlling. Around their land, they gave estates to trusted daimos, and around the edge of Japan was given to their former enemies. That's interesting.
Land around the edges, yeah.
Yeah, so they were like kind of ousted. The Tokugawas also employed spies to watch powerful families in Japan. The arts flourished during the Tokugawa period. So did trade and commerce. However, Japan was not entirely peaceful. There were many peasant rebellions. Nevertheless, samurais were less useful than in former times, and many became ronin or samurai without masters. That's what a ronin means. It's like a masterless samurai.
Okay.
In excuse me. In the late 17th century, kabuki theaters developed in Japan. Male actors played the female roles, and actors are accompanied by music and singing. The material art of kendo, which still exists today, developed into its modern form in the late 18th century. How are we doing on time?
We got like about 7.5 minutes left.
Okay. We might need a number 3.
I know, right?
Yeah, because we talk too much. Alright. So, it was derived from the samurai training, but practitioners used bamboo staves instead of swords. By 1853, the Western power wanted Japan to open her market to their goods. The Americans also wanted to use Japan as a coaling station for steam ships. So in July of 1853, 4 American ships commanded by Commodore Matthew Perry, sounds like an actor,
I know, right?
sailed into Japan's water near Edo.
Oh my gosh, Chandler Bing?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Perry handed over a message asking for trading rights, cooling ports, and protection for shipwrecked sailors. Perry warned he would return yet next year with a much larger force. He returned in February of 1859 with 9 ships. Japan's armed forces were in no state to resist, so the shogun agreed to open 2 ports to American ships. By 1856, France, Britain, and the Netherlands and Russia had also forced Japan to sign similar treaties. In 1858, the American forces forced the Japanese to open more ports to trade, and Britain, France, and Russia forced Japan to sign similar treaties. Treaties stated that Japan could only charge low import duties on import goods. Further, foreign citizens were exempt from Japanese law. Wow. So, this is Japan in the late 19th century. Right here. Not surprisingly, the humiliating treaties were bitterly resented by the Japanese, who called them unequal treaties.
By the way, we're now talking about the late 19th century.
We are talking about the late 19th. Oh yeah. Yeah, we're already in the late 19th century. Furthermore, the shogun lost face because of his weakness. Many Japanese thought that Japan would only be strong if the shogunate or the shogunate was abolished and the emperor was restored to power. Some Japanese wanted to resist their foreigners. Others wanted to copy Western technology. Opinion was bitterly divided. Finally, in 1868, there was a short civil war. Pro-emperor, pro-shogun forces clashed at Fushimi, and the pro-emperor forces won. Therefore, we have an emperor still. After the emperor Meiji and his followers were determined to modernize Japan, and they succeed. And I can't talk. I'm trying to speak Japanese here, and they succeeded. In an astonishingly short period of time, Japan was transformed from a primitive agricultural country to a modern industrial one. The government encouraged industrialization with loans and grants. Soon, many new industries such as shipbuildings were flourishing. In 1870, the first mechanized silk mill opened in Japan. Also in 1870, a telegraph was laid between Tokyo, as Edo was renamed, and Yokohama. A railway was built between those two destinations in 1872. Meanwhile, in 1871, private armies kept daimyos were abolished. Many samurais joined the new national army. The same year, the first Japanese newspaper was published. So, all of a sudden, the emperor comes back, and Japan is just blossoming. Okay? I know we only have a little time left. In 1872, compulsory education was introduced into Japan. The same year, conscription was introduced. Now, let's specify. Do you know what conscription means?
I do not know what conscription means.
We call it the draft system. Okay?
Okay.
Conscription is when people are conscribed into the military. Okay?
Okay.
No different from being drafted. Although in Japan it's not a lottery. They just pick people and there you go. And in 1878, the Japanese army was reformed to be like the German army. Yeah, don't you see the connection?
Yep.
Yeah. The Japanese Navy was modeled on the British Navy. In 1873, Japan adopted the Western calendar. The same year, a land tax was introduced, and the emperor and empress began wearing Western clothing. In 1889, the Emperor Meiji granted a constitution based on the German one. Japan gained a parliament called the Diet, or Diet as we would say in English, but only a small minority of men were allowed to vote. However, these rapid changes were not popular with everyone. In 1877, samurai led by Saigo Takamori, which is that's the movie was Tom Cruise. That was based on it.
Okay.
He rebelled between the years of. Well, he died in 1877, but in 1827 he was born. Rebelled in Satsuma. A conscript army led by Marshal Yamagata crushed the rebellion. Afterwards, the samurais lost their privilege, and most were forced to take civilian jobs. In 1894, Japan and Korea quarreled over Korea. China regarded Korea as being under its influence, and in 1894 sent troops into that country. The Japanese objected and went to war. The Sino-Japanese War was a stunning victory for Japan. The Japanese quickly drove the Chinese out of Korea and captured Port Arthur. Oh my God, I can't speak today. By the Treaty of Shimonoseki in 1895, Japan gained Formosa, Taiwan, and Port Arthur. China was also forced to pay a large indemnity and to refrain from interfering in Korean politics. However, Russia, France, and Germany forced Japan to give back Port Arthur.
See you next